Hello, grade 12 learners! Happy 6th week of learning lessons in philosophy. So welcome back to our discussion in Introduction to Philosophy of the Human Person. So week 6, lesson 6, knowledge and the truth. This lesson focuses on the evaluation of truth from opinion. So at the end of this module, you are expected to acquire the following. Distinguished opinion from truth and analyze situations that show difference between opinion and truth. Have you checked your social media today? Now, if you have, I know you've seen some controversial issues that are posted in your newsfeed. So I want you to think of that very controversial issue in the news today and describe the interaction. So take a look at the comment section and try to discover the kind of comments that are posted there, maybe online or offline. So write at least 5 statements from these comments of different people, and identify whether it's a good argument or an opinion only. So write your answer on a paper for your first activity in this lesson. Now, we know in today's society that most of the people's activity always revolves in the social media. Before we go to sleep and when we wake up, we always check on our social media, and we actually encounter different pieces of information with some various sources. Okay? And that's how we interact with our families and friends and members of the community. And most of these informations we receive is somehow helpful to us, but some may mislead us or may even utterly give us some false statements. So every day we are confronted with the news and claims and announcements from our peers, from our family members, and even from the different people or some figures of authority, the government themselves and the media. So how do we know if these news items or information we receive are telling us the truth? Philosophers often argue about the concept of truth. So knowledge can be truthful only if there is validity and acceptance for the proposal of that concept. For example, when you are going to answer the true or false test, you try to judge the statements you read, whether if it's true or false. So this means that statements may contain truth or not truth because it's just an opinion or an argument of a certain person. So sometimes when we are going to consider the reality when making a statement about the reality of life in this world, that means it's only a proposition, and this proposition may sometimes carry the truth or may not carry the truth. And usually propositions are stated with just short statements or sentences. So what is truth and why is it important? Why do we have to deal with truth and why do we have to study about it? So knowledge is a clear awareness and understanding of something. It's the product of questions that allow us for clear answers provided by the facts. So our knowledge is comprised of ideas and beliefs that we know to be true. Now, when we say knowledge, that is just your awareness of how you perceive things around you. So when you start asking questions, and now when you perceive already the answer to the questions, and that could give you the facts or the knowledge after doing some research or maybe some verification of the answers to the questions. So your knowledge is comprising now your ideas and of course the beliefs that you are going to uphold to. Now, what comprises knowledge? So knowledge is based on the reality. So these are the propositions or statements that are already observed to be real or truthful. We consider them as facts. So these are statements, however, not evidently or immediately known to be true. And it's a claim, and further examination is required. And the claim or further examination is required to establish whether it's a true statement or false statement, or whether it's considered as a fact or an opinion only. Now, in science, they consider truth as something observable and empirical, because in science everything is proven, and everything is proven through verification and experimentation. So when they propose an idea or a certain theory, that is not to be considered as fact unless it's already verified or experimented and proven to be true. Now, how do we know if something is true? So ancient Greek philosophers approach the problem of truth by looking at the nature of knowledge and how we know what we know. So we assume that everything we know about this world is true. That is your first assumption. But philosophers who pondered upon the origins of knowledge doubted everything there is to know about themselves and the world. So they consider a lot of things first before they verify if that kind of proposal on a certain statement about the world is true or not. For example, you say, I'm alive, I have a body, and I can breathe. So when you start to have a doubt within yourself, this is the very important purpose in philosophy, because your doubt drives your desire to discover the truth. So when you start to question about something, maybe you question about your existence, and that's the time that you will be led to discovering the truth. So in philosophy, systematic doubt is employed to determine truth. This means that every statement, a claim, or an evidence is scrutinized and analyzed. You should have first a doubt on a certain statement that you received or heard before believing it. So that's the time you have to consider first. You have to research and you have to discover whether this statement is true or not. So nothing is taken as true unless there is sufficient reason and evidence to prove that it is indeed true. So let's rewrite the statement as questions to make them easier to analyze. So if you have some questions in your mind, now you're related to a certain statement, that will be now your starting point to discover whether that question that becomes a statement is a true statement or not a true statement. Another set of questions that you may have within yourself, like, am I alive? Do I have a body? Can I breathe? So the obvious answer would be examine yourself to determine if indeed you are alive, that you have a body, and you can breathe. Then you can now say that you are alive, you have your body, and you can breathe. So that's the time that you start to discover by means of the different strategies that you may employ by observing and maybe examining. Like your question, if you're alive, if you have a body, if you can breathe, then you try to examine yourself. So the same thing when you try to discover the truth, you have to examine first the different angles of that proposed idea or statement to discover whether it's true or not. Now, one perspective on truth. So it's a belief is true if it can be justified or proven true in the use of one's senses. So using your different senses, that's how you can justify or prove if something is true or not. Another basis for determining the truth is belief or statement is true if it's based on facts. So if it's already like existing fact, then there's no reason why you don't believe it. If a fact is considered when it's already proven for how many times, and it has been existing already for some time. It has been existing for some time. So getting consensus or having people agree on a common belief is another way of determining what is true. Talking about like a general idea, okay? So this approach has a certain limitations also. For example, if you can get your classmates to agree that you do not need to study to become successful, it doesn't make that statement true or something to believe in by others also. Therefore, you have to use other means to really answer the question whether it's true or not true. So how can philosophy help us in distinguishing truth from opinion? So let us consider the different meanings of opinion, conclusion, beliefs, and explanation. So opinions are statements going beyond providing facts. They also provide conclusion or perspective regarding certain situations. So these are just opinion from the perceived situations or observation on something. Then you form your opinions. Then some of the statements even advance a belief about a certain thing or a person. So opinions are also the basis for making arguments and convincing people on a certain claim or fact. Now, once your opinion is already testified by other people, especially with a proven research or study, then that opinion of yours will become a fact. Now, conclusion is a judgment based on a certain fact. Now, that's the time that when you form your opinion with some support of other people's studies, then you can form now a judgment, a conclusion that will lead to a certain fact. Now, beliefs are statements that express convictions that are easily, clearly explained by facts. So to judge the truthfulness of a belief, we must also consider things if we rely merely on facts. And another is explanation. They are statements that assume the claim to be true and provide reasons why the statement is true. So what are arguments also? So arguments are a series of statements that provide reason to convince the reader or listener that a claim or opinion is truthful. So you have your argument and you have some support. Thus, you need to be very careful when you listen to some arguments, since not all arguments are truthful. Okay, so arguments often take the form of statements that are either claims or facts that are phrased in such a way that they seem reasonable. However, a number of arguments may be based on faulty reasoning. So later on, we will discover what are these false reasoning. We call them fallacies. These are kinds of arguments that are called fallacies. So when you say fallacies, they are sometimes intentional as a person making the claim in desperate to convince you or someone to accept his or her argument. Another is bias. When you say bias, the person's views of the person, bias or the personal view of a person presenting. So biases are not necessarily errors in reasoning, but refer to tendencies or influences which may affect the views of people also. So later we'll discover what are these things that we are talking about. Now, remember that in order to gain truth, you have to be able to pass the test of justifications. So, in other words, when you form your opinion, you must be able to argue whether it's reasonable or not. So, a philosophical mind must then be prepared to examine arguments supporting an opinion. So, you have to discover first and examine whether that opinion is a good argument or not a good argument. Now, how about fake arguments? So, what do you say about fake arguments? So, arguments composed of claim, the conclusion of an argument, and premises, the reasons used or support of the conclusion. So, that is an argument, a claim, a conclusion, and the reasons that supports your claim. But when you say fake arguments, they are called fallacies. So when you say fallacies, they are a group of statements that appear to be like true arguments but fail to support the conclusion. So what are these, what we call fake arguments or fallacies? Number one, the first type of fallacy is the ad hominem. So when we make arguments in order to, to verify or to support that our opinion is true, or our claim is true, sometimes we use this what we call fallacy number one, which is the ad hominem. So ad hominem is like you are doing a personal attack to someone you are doing an argument with. So when you as an arguer reject a person's argument to claim by attacking the person's character rather than examining the worth of the argument or claim itself, so you're becoming personal already in making this argument. Like in the example here, Professor Dogi has argued for more emphasis on music in our face-to-face classes to facilitate creativity, but Dogi is a selfish, big-headed fool, so I absolutely refuse to listen to him. So as you can see in the pattern of the conversation or statement, so the person writing this is making a bad argument in the sense that he is or she is making a personal attack to that person he or she is arguing with. So therefore, this argument must be fallacy. So it's a fallacy number one, ad hominem. Another type of fallacy is the argumentum ad baculum. So it's like when you're making an argument, appealing by force. So when we say appealing by force, it's like it means you're making a threat or a physical or psychological violence against others if they refuse to accept the conclusion offered. So you are doing it by force. Like for example, in a teacher and student argument inside the class, since a person is in authority, maybe it may give also some instances that a teacher may say that, oh, if you're going to disagree with me, then it will affect your grades or like that. So this appeal by force occurs whenever intimidations are already applied. You are intimidated by a person's authority. That is why you are forced to believe what he or she says. Fallacy number 3 is the argument ad misericordiam. So it's an appeal to pity. What is this appeal to pity? So you, as an arguer, attempts to evoke feelings of pity or compassion, where such feelings, however, understandable, but are not relevant to the truth of the arguer's conclusion. Remember, we have already studied that when you're making a philosophy, when you are applying it in your day-to-day experience, you have to disregard your emotion. It should be mind over your body. So in this scenario, when you apply this type of argument, you are compelling others to believe in you by touching the softest part of their emotion, their feelings, for them to understand you. Okay, so like in example, so like a student is convincing a teacher that he or she doesn't deserve an F grade because of this and that she or he went through. So that is like compelling a teacher to really give him or her a grade of C or D, even if she or he doesn't deserve it. So this is an example of an appeal to pity, for someone to believe in what you say. So you appeal to pity. And of course, we have also fallacy number 4, the argumentum ad populum. So this is what we call bandwagon fallacy. So it's a very common one, the peer pressure, and it's very common among your peers, among your cycle of friends. Like when you argue and you try to appeal to that person's desire to be popular, accepted, or valued, rather than to be logical, relevant reasons or evidence. So for example, when like all the really cool tailor students smoke cigarettes, therefore you should also. Or like a group of young people do this, so it's like a popular thing to do, then you're convinced to do it because everybody does it. So you have to be careful with that bandwagon argument. That's why I said a while ago that not all things others believed in, you should believe in also. So you have to be careful. Now, for your activity in this lesson, you are asked to give your own situational example for each fallacy discussed and write them in a paper. So identify those 4 types of fallacies and give your own situations or examples that will discuss each fallacy. So as a way to end our lesson, I would like to share this quote of the day: that everything we hear is an opinion and not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. So as a person learning this lesson in philosophy, I hope that you will be extra careful in dealing with all the things that you perceive around you, especially in social media. Do not believe everything that you hear as a fact. You have to discover first, verify whether it's really a fact before sharing it to others. Because if we just share whatever we see in the social media, sometimes when you're engrossed with the news and that controversial issue, we tend to share among our friends. that by doing that, by sharing false information, will also mislead other people to false information. Proverbs 19:22, the Lord detests lying lips, but He delights in those who tell the truth. So in your time today, the access of information is just around the corner, and I hope you are being responsible in sharing the truth to other people. Share the truth and nothing but the truth. So I'd like to thank you once again for joining with me in this another lesson in philosophy, and I hope to see you all next week in our next learning episode. See you and goodbye.